Hello, and welcome to another episode of Are You Crazy Enough? So, in this episode, I want to talk to you about leadership. And there are so many different facets to leadership. So, this is not going to be very broad, but I'm going to try to be able to steer you down a road through an experience that I had in my journey into understanding my role as a leader, but also what influenced this subject. You might not know that I host a podcast called Catch the Craze. It's a podcast where we focus on independent creators in all forms of art, whether it's music, film, comic books. And on an episode that we did, episode number 168, we generally have a segment called Get Your Meds. It's like your medicine. And we touch on several different subjects. And on this episode, we talked about whether or not you were born a leader or you're made into a leader. And this is why I find that specific episode interesting, because we did have a healthy discussion on that subject. And I will have it posted here in the event that you want to see it. So while I do believe in destiny, I also believe that the influences that surround you throughout your life will determine or shape who you will become. And there are several decisions in pivotal moments in your life that you have to make. Sometimes you're not even realizing that that decision will have a significant impact on who you become down the road, right? So I believe that the role of a leader requires a lot from the person. You give more than you get. You sacrifice a lot more because you have to build trust, earn respect, influence a diverse group of individuals by understanding or meeting them where they stand individually. And you have to make those singular investments in order to have a collective result. Right? So if you want to get a group of people to buy into you, you have to do several things. Number one, there's a connection phase, right? There is a game of chess where you're filling each other out. Who are you? What are you about? What are your intentions? But also, you have to figure out who in that collective has the most influence. Who has the ear of the people? That individual or those individuals will require a lot of investment on the person in the role of leadership. Because those are the people you have to win over first. Because if you can get them to understand and see your vision and buy into it, they will become your champions. And it would make spreading your message that much more seamless or easier. But if you're just trying to one size fit everything, you're going to have a hard time. And most likely you'll fail. And little moments in time are like raindrops. Over time, it becomes a puddle. That puddle becomes a pond. That pond becomes an ocean. Right? The more those drops fall. That's your investment. Your investment are those drops of water. So, in looking back, I understand now. But in those moments where I'm dropping water, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just dealing with situations at the moment, not connecting the dots, not understanding how it'll affect me down the road, how I will grow from it. And I'm going to share a story on one moment in my career that really surprised me. One of my biggest lessons. So I was recruited for an organization to become a general store manager, and it would have been the first time in that role. So now, not only was I going into a new role, but now it was with a different company, and it was an off-price world. I was in big box retail, and this was off-price. So there's a lot of different things. So before that, I was either the number 3 or number 2 guy. Now I'm the number 1. So you're exposed to things you wouldn't have been exposed to, people you normally wouldn't have been exposed to, and generally everything falls on your shoulders. So there's lots of weight on there. So I remember I was training in a location that was nowhere in another state, where the demographic was very different from the location I would inherit. The income wealth ratio was different. Education level was different. So I asked during this time if I can go to the store that I would be taking over as a visitor. So it was scheduled that I'd be there, and the team in the store was told, because there was a general manager still there, that I was visiting from corporate to give me a tour. So I remember when I got there, night and day from where I was training to where I landed. The standards were less than stellar. They were definitely not acceptable. The standards were below standard. The culture was very aggressive. And I remember seeing all the things. You just walk around, you see violations everywhere. Headphones on, pants hanging down. So that put a little apprehension. Created some uneasiness on my part. Like, oh, what am I walking into? And so they had a department manager walk me around and give me a tour. And I remember walking into the back of house stockroom. And that's where the beginning of this lesson started. Walked in, and there was just product and boxes everywhere. And the business model didn't call for that. You're supposed to be clean every day. This wasn't. It was about 4 trailers worth of product in the stockroom. And you're climbing over stuff. It's not like it was organized at all. But that wasn't what worried me. What worried me was there were tank tops on from some of the guys, the team members. And there was this one big team member, very intimidating, using profanity, making threats, very aggressive threats to other team members, and the ratio was about 70% female in the back of house and 30% male. So the department manager I was with pretended he didn't hear anything. So I looked at him and said, "I know you just heard that. You can't deny the fact that you just heard that." And he looked at me like a child looking to their dad. "What do you want me to do about it?" And I was dumbfounded. It didn't click. It didn't register. What do you that question should never have come out that person's mouth. I said, "Well, let's ask him up to the office. We need to talk about this. We need to address this now." He asked the gentleman to come up. He was definitely afraid of this gentleman. And we head upstairs. When we get upstairs, the rest of his colleagues, the other managers, were in the office. And in that location, I think there were 9 assistant managers. And of the 9, 1 was male, the rest were female. I walk in with him into the office, and he has this worried look, and they look at him and say, "What's wrong?" And he tells them, and they said, "Well, they're leaving. They're not going to stay for this because they were afraid of this guy as well." I didn't understand this. So I was like, "What is it that I don't know about this person that I have the management team so afraid of?" That's beside the point. We're going to have this conversation. So, Cinnamon walks in, really big guy, and I don't know if you've ever seen Friday, Ice Cube's movie, with this the actor that played Tebow. This is how big this guy was. All right, so he's very menacing, and so the manager looks at me. He said, "Oh, so what do you want me to do?" Start the conversation. So he says, for lack of I'm just leaving names out, but he says, Edgar, I need to talk to you about what you said. And with the most aggressive manner, body gesture, tone, facial expression, Edgar responded, "What did I say?" Very aggressive. So much so that it shook the department manager. And he looked at me. so, and I said, "Continue." He says, "Well, about what you said in the stockroom." Again, what I say, very aggressive. So obviously I knew we weren't going to get anywhere. So I asked the gentleman, the department manager, to step aside. And I stepped in front of Edgar. And I reached my hand out. I put my hand out. I said, "Hello, Edgar. My name is. I'm visiting here today. And I couldn't help but overhear what you said in the stockroom. Now, before we begin, it's obvious that you are upset about something. So we have two choices. You can go and take a walk, clear your mind, and come back so we can have a conversation and you can actually hear what I have to say and we can discuss this. Or we can just have the conversation now." So he paused and looked at me and he sized me up and down. To the point where I was like, do I have to take a position, like a defense stance? Because I felt as if something was about to happen. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I didn't want to feed into my fear. And he mumbled, "I'll be back." So I said, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. And so he approached me within about 6 inches apart. "I'll be back." Almost like the Terminator. And he storms out. So I look at the gentleman that I'm with and I'm confused. So I said, "Let me find the general store manager," because he was in the building, but he was entertaining another general store manager that was visiting from another location. So I go and I find him, and I said, I'm going to call him Henry. I said, "Henry, we have a situation." And Henry was this older man getting ready to retire, very soft-spoken, Santa Claus like, and I'm explaining to him what happened, and as I'm doing that, Edgar comes storming towards me, but he's not letting his gaze off me. He's staring right at me as he's storming down the aisle towards me. So here's what's happening in my mind right now. Newsflash: new executive gets killed. That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, "Oh, this is over. This is crazy. I can't believe this. I asked to come here. Why this day?" So all these thoughts are going through my mind. But I turn sideways to position myself to defend myself in the event that I'm about to get assaulted. This is real. This isn't fake. So he's storming right to me, and Henry, the general store manager, steps in front of him softly. He says, "Hey, Edgar, buddy, let's take a walk." So he puts his arm around him and they start walking away, but the guy is with his head looking right back at me. Like I took something from him. So I left for the day. I was done. My tour was over. So I knew that I made it back to where I was training, and I couldn't help but think, what would they do? What was the response after I left? How did they handle this situation? Why was everyone afraid of this person? Why was it okay to wear tank tops? Why was it okay for the headphones? Why was it okay for the profanity? All these questions. So now I'm there. I'm in the building. Training's over. And there was another incident with Edgar. So I get involved. It's very aggressive. I tell everybody to leave the office. I just want to be alone with him. They were shocked. They didn't understand. Why would you want to be alone with this man? So I say, all right, Edgar. He didn't want to sit. He was standing. He's very aggressive. And I said, all right, if we're going to do this, I would like for you to give me the respect that I'm giving you. Because right now, the message you're sending me is putting me in an uncomfortable position. And I don't want to feel that way. And I don't think you're doing it intentionally. Can we have this conversation? Can you please have a seat? So he sat down. And so before I went into all of the violations, I needed to fact find and understand, how did we get here? This didn't happen overnight. This was enabled. So I asked, what's going on? Why are you so angry? And then he started spilling the beans. I'm not getting hours because they know that I have a record. They treat me like I'm lower class, and he was just going on and on and on. And I didn't go into the first flag about they know about I have a record. I didn't go about into any of those things. What I did ask is, what I did remind him is of what my observations were. I said, well, so far, here's what I've learned about you. And this is from me, nobody else speaking for me. You don't like to do anything but stay in the stockroom. You have an aggressive tone. Most of the team members are afraid of you. You don't support the team. It seems like you don't even want to be here. And he goes, well, I'm sorry to be, treated this way. And so I said, okay. So I can give you hours if that's the problem. But you need to be here and you need to be flexible. And so he's like, how many hours? And he's a part-timer. And at that time, part-timers were 16 hours. I said, I'll give you 25 hours. We'll start there. And his eyes lit up. You're going to give me 25 hours? Yes. And he repeated himself like 3 times. You're going to give me 20? Yes. I said, but if I need you on the selling floor, you have to be there. If we have a problem with lighting, I'm going to need you. Anywhere we have an issue, I'm going to need you to be flexible. Because in this environment, there were no handymen, there were no electricians, there were no housekeeping. We did everything. So I said, you have to be flexible. And he said, if you give me 25 hours, I'll do whatever you want. I said, okay. But there's another caveat to this. This is why. I said, you can't miss another day of work. Based on what I'm seeing, we should have separated you from the organization a long time ago because your attendance is far beyond the limitations. You've exceeded that. So it requires for us to separate. So I will give you the 25 hours, but you need to come to work. Yes. Respectful, the whole bit. Shirt, no tank tops. We went through the whole. He said, okay. He didn't want to shake my hand. Got up, left. So I personally made sure the schedule was done. And I personally made sure that I was the one calling him on the radio when I needed it. And I started from day one. First time I called on the radio, He didn't respond. I went and found him. Hey, Herman, you're not responding to the radio. And he looked at me. I said, you forgot about our deal? Oh, no, I didn't. And so I don't think he thought I would follow up. And I don't think anybody in the building thought I would follow up. And this became a routine. 5 times a day, wherever I needed him, I called him. And for the first couple of weeks, he was the model associate. Behavior changed. Smiled. Didn't even think it was possible. And then he didn't come to work for a couple of days. So I made certain that I was there every day until Edgar came to work. And so I was in the office. I had him come to the office and I asked him to have a seat. I say, Edgar, can you remind me of our conversation and the agreement we made? He looked at me. He put his head down. He looked up. He said, "You said I can't miss work, and if I do, that you'd have to separate." I said, "Yes, and that's what has to happen now." He looked at me. He stood up. He reached his hand out and he shook my hand. He goes, "I screwed up. I know. This is my fault. I made a choice. I have to live with it. But I want to thank you for treating me like a human being and treating me like a man, and not holding my past against me." And he walked out. And a couple of hours later, there was a phone call from me in the store. I answered the phone and it was Edgar. And he says, "Hey, I have an interview at this location. I was wondering if I can use you as a reference." I said, "Absolutely." I learned a lot about myself through this process. My fear of failing forced me to dig deep and to try to understand the circumstances behind what I was seeing. It didn't end or start with Edgar. There was a lack of role clarity in the building. Leadership components were missing. But I had to start somewhere, and Edgar not only helped me learn about myself, but also helped me teach the entire population in the store, because all 125 team members and 9 managers were watching intently. And what they realized was, remove emotion, understand your purpose, lead with respect and empathy. Don't lower standards. Bring everybody up. One conversation at a time, you can make a difference. And what it did was I earned the respect of the team members, and I gained the attention, because it took a longer process with the management team, but I gained the attention of the management team. I think at that point they said, something, there's a new sheriff in town. And I said that to myself, like, oh, because I didn't know if I was going to make it through that process. So that was a raindrop in the bucket throughout my journey. And that was a pivotal moment where I learned that if you treat everyone and you meet them at where they stand, you can't get them to come here because they don't understand or recognize what here is. It's foreign to them. It's uncomfortable. You have to come there and somehow influence them by gaining their trust to walk with you and meet you where you want to take them. That took a lot of energy, took a lot of time, took a lot of reading. And I will touch on the books that helped me through this process. One was The First 90 Days, and the other one was The Leader Who Had No Title by Robin Sharma. And I'll tell you what portions of those books that actually helped me navigate through this space. But there's no right or wrong, and there's a lot of different components to becoming a leader. A lot of it has to do with listening to learn. So, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please give us a thumbs up. Leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts. Subscribe to the show. If there's any topics you'd like me to cover, let me know. But Sam, and I wish you nothing but success. And remember, your future is defined by your thoughts and your actions. What you think becomes your reality. So be mindful of your thoughts. Have a blessed day.